Hey everybody, it's Tom. I'm coming to you today. I just wanted to offer some thoughts on a book. I did a little work with this book a while back, and I'm revisiting it. The Discovery of Being by Rollo May. And generally, I'd like to move the camera, my shaky camera work. Generally, I like to just talk, right? Just try to comment on whatever the content is, the topic, the content, the text is that is my focus. But as a point of departure today, I want to read a particular passage from the second chapter of this book. If you take individuals as units in a group for the purposes of statistical prediction, certainly a legitimate use of psychological science, you are exactly defining out of the picture the characteristics which make this individual an existing person. Or, when you take him or her as a composite of drives and deterministic forces, you have defined for study everything except the one to whom these experiences happen. Everything except the existing person himself. Therapy is one activity in which we cannot escape the necessity of taking the subject as an existing person. He says therapy, and certainly that obtains, but I would say not just therapy, but in our engagement with the world and with other people, it is incumbent upon us to do the same, to take them as existing persons having experience seriously. And in fact, what that does is it actually, in my view, generates a therapeutic culture. Now, the context within which Rollo May is advancing this is an explication of what he terms existential psychology. Or it can also sometimes be referred to not so much as psychology broadly, but also specific tact toward therapeutic analysis or therapeutic psychoanalysis. And so you take the qualifier, the adjective existential, and append it onto those. What that all amounts is informing the tradition of psychology with the insights, the concepts, the tactics, the tacts, the strategies that we can inherit from the tradition of existentialism. And Rollo May offers 6 points that sort of allow us to draw that synthesis together in a relatively straightforward manner. Those 6 points are that we all exist in our own centeredness, that our encounter with reality is grounded in a particular, center of subjectivity, experience. We exist as subjects. We exist in the first person. And this leads directly to the second principle, which as existence in the first person, we are affirming of the integrity of the being of that orientation, that we are here. We need to protect that centeredness. Correlatively, in human beings, and really not just human beings, but we'll just use human beings for the time being, since I'm a human being, you are likely a human being. It is also necessary for us to go out beyond our center, to expand and to grow. And this happens to some degree just as a consequence of natural biological process. But there's more to the story than just that. Because in human beings, what characterizes or a facet of that growth is that it is subject to our will, that we can direct it along specific trajectories. But in order for us to do that, in order for us to affect or actualize our freedom, it's not just enough to be aware of the world. To be merely aware of the world would put us in a state of more or less undifferentiated reactivity. It's necessary to go beyond mere awareness to what Rollo and many people identify as self-consciousness. What is the distinction? The distinction is that in self-consciousness, the subject comes into a knowing that they are the object of experience, and that there is a kind of distance or space between those experiences and the integrity of one's center. There's a space there and a spaciousness which gives birth to the possibility of transcending our immediate situation and doing so in a deliberate fashion. Now, connected to this non-trivial facet of life are two additional considerations. One is that this activity of growth, this desire to go beyond where we are to something greater, while retaining a sense of integrity in our own self, inevitably involves risk. It's just part of the gig, right? The second thing is that we're aware of that. We're aware of that risk. We are aware of the fact that it is part and parcel of existence, of being. And so the word, which is invoked by existentialism broadly and by Rollo here, is anxiety. Anxiety is not a disorder, not a defect of response. It is an awareness of, to borrow a phrase from another author, Thomas Merton, an awareness of our radical contingency. And neurosis, when it becomes problematic, represents an arrest of our movements toward growth and development due to an apprehension that the risks involved in those movements forward is such that it could compromise the fundamental centeredness, which is the point of departure. Now, that percept may or may not be accurate, and when it's not accurate, that is generally when you're dealing with pathological neurosis. Neurosis represents often vestigial forms of adaptation from times, usually in our younger life, where we made decisions in the interest of self-preservation, not just biologically, but psychologically, that have now outworn their utility. To move beyond those vestigial uses, we have to return to a realization of our own freedom, which is actually not so difficult conceptually, not so difficult intellectually, but the actual encounter of our freedom is really a premier emotional challenge. And what existential psychology, or the existential approach to psychology and therapy does, is places that front and center, and the need to come into a relationship with our own capacity for will and decision. And overall, I think that's a very useful way of putting things. I might come back to more stuff, but I'm running out of time. But I just wanted to come to you with that this evening. So ciao for now. It's Tom.